It's a bird, it's a plane, it's another ranking video from Gabrioni. Today, I'm ranking the 8 live-action pure Superman movies, from Superman meeting the Mole Men to fighting alongside Krypto. That's enough yapping from me though, here we go. In 8th and last place, I have Superman 3. Yikes, this was such a big step down from Superman 2. I thought the story was silly, the villains weren't great, and overall it was a pretty goofy movie. The idea that there'd be an evil Superman and all he'd do is fix the Leaning Tower of Pisa and flick peanuts into glass bottles is silly. I thought it was silly that a big newspaper like the Daily Planet would do a story on Smallville's 10-year reunion. Imagine if the New York Times did this. It's such a waste of time and resources, honestly. I thought the villains were boring. Once you get away from Zod, Lex, and Brainiac, Superman's villains get pretty boring in general. I just didn't think there were really any stakes this whole movie. The last 2 movies felt like it would be world-changing if the villain won, but it doesn't seem like a big deal in this one. They seem to kind of dip their toes into having Brainiac by having Superman fight a computer at the end, but it just was not enough. I thought Lana was fine, but I think Superman movies really shine with Lois Lane in the female lead. This movie just wasn't very good. I don't know if I've ever seen a drop-off in quality between sequels like this, but I really hope that Superman 4 is better than this one. I guess we'll see. In 7th place, I have Superman 4, A Quest for Peace. So I'll start off by saying that this was a bad movie, but it has a few things going for it that helped it rank above Superman 3. For one, it was only like 90 minutes long. That helped so much because there was less filler and it just got right into the action, unlike the other 3 previous movies. I liked Lex being the main villain again, and the clone was more fun than the villains from the last movie. This was a silly movie though. Superman moved the entire moon at one point. This would have created waves that laid waste to many coastal areas. I found Clark never being able to see Superman was kind of a silly bit. He forgot his pen, he has to go get it, and when he does, Superman shows up and no one ever figures it out somehow. Because this movie's so short, I'm finding it hard to talk about that much longer. It was silly how easily Lex broke out of jail. I also never thought I'd see Superman doing Zumba stuff, but we got to see that in this movie. I like that a love interest was finally into Clark instead of Superman. I thought that was pretty rad. And the extra stuff with the newspaper buyout was kind of nothing. So while I don't think this movie is very good, it's not last on the list at least. At number 6, I have Superman and the Mole Men. This was the first true Superman movie. There were 2 before it, but they weren't exactly movies. And this was different than any Superman I'd ever seen before. The best way I could describe it was a Superman cameo in a Twilight Zone episode. Since it was in the 50s, everyone talked like they were in It's a Wonderful Life, which was super silly. As the title suggests, this was when Superman got to meet the Mole Men. And let me tell you, I've never seen such a bloodthirsty town before. They took one look at the ugly creatures and tried to shoot them and even burn them alive in a building at one point. This town of 1400 had dug 6 miles into the earth and realized the earth was actually hollow, which was hilarious. And not only that, but there is life that lives down there, and they're potentially radioactive. Superman does his very best to keep the angry mob from going after them, but this is the least powered up Superman I've ever seen. He could fly and stuff, but it seemed like it took him a lot of effort to break a gun, which is crazy. This was before Superman was powerful enough to go toe-to-toe with gods. But this is a short watch, a little under an hour long, and it's not terrible by any means. But it's just not the Superman that we really know today. At number 5, I have Superman Returns. I don't know if this makes any sense to anyone else, but this movie felt very 2006, which makes sense, that's when it came out. But that can be a good thing or a bad thing based on your perspective. It was back when there were 2 Fantastic Four movies and they'd already fought Doctor Doom and Galactus. Their 2 biggest bad guys. There's no sense of scale in the movies, and I don't know. I wasn't a fan of that. I didn't dislike this movie, it was just kind of okay to me. I hate seeing Kevin Spacey in anything these days. And having him as Lex definitely made me like this movie less. I also thought Lex's plan was stupid. Yes, land is super valuable, but not if the land's crystal. Land's valuable for crops and cities, and I don't think as many people would want to live there as he thinks. And taking away as much land from the US as he was going to, there would have been food shortages killing way more than he thought. He said billions, but a lot of people would have probably died taking out all those crops. Also, if the world saw you just kill billions of people, they'd nuke you into extinction. I liked all the actors in the movie, though. Even the little kid was pretty good. I thought the dynamic between Superman, Lois, and James Marsden's character was interesting as well. It would be very hard when your wife's ex, was Superman. But this was an okay movie overall. It's a bit 2006-y, but not as bad as a lot of the others. At number 4, I have Man of Steel. I wasn't a huge fan of this movie when it initially came out, but I made sure to rewatch it right before writing this just to give it a fair shot. And I don't think it is a bad movie. I have some issues with it, but overall I did enjoy it. I have a hard time with Zack Snyder movies in general. He seems to think slow motion and explosions make up for not having much of a story. And that works for some things, but I think it held Man of Steel back. One of the things that many people didn't like was him killing Zod. To them, killing is the one thing Superman would never do. I disagree though. In the movie, he doesn't do that until it is literally his only option left. If he didn't kill Zod, Zod would have killed, I think 4 innocent people, probably a lot more. Then, he was clearly emotional after that, showing how hard it was for him to do. My problem is most of the fights before this. You're telling me people weren't dying when he flew Zod through a gas station and an IHOP? Those were deaths he could have probably avoided pretty easily. Why make your stand in a relatively populated town? You're in Kansas. Have you ever driven through Kansas? It's all open fields. He should have brought them to a less populated area. This is what bothers me more than anything about Snyder. There's not as many explosions in a cornfield, so there's no way they'd fight there. And Superman as a character would have been much more focused on everyone's safety rather than the fight altogether. I think at the end of the day, he didn't understand this character. I was really happy with almost all the casting. Henry Cavill is amazing, and I really liked Michael Shannon as Zod. The one casting I thought was odd was Amy Adams as Lois Lane. I feel like that was purely a casting because she's famous rather than she was right for the role. But overall, I like this movie way more than I remember, and I wish we could have seen Cavill in a better Superman movie. But the Snyderverse was there to kill that dream, unfortunately. At number 3, I have Superman 2. I think it was very close between this one and Superman 1, but this movie was slightly worse in my opinion. Part of that was it being an hour and 10 minutes before we'd seen Superman pretty much do anything but saving a kid from falling into the water, that and the Paris stuff. Most of this movie is him being with Lois. The fact that he gave up his power so quickly was crazy. I never understood Clark's thing for Lois in general, but why does he need to turn human to be with her? That just made no sense to me. I thought the 3 villains weren't as good as Lex, so I'm glad Lex was still there and scheming, as usual. I wish Zod was more into revenge, like he is in later iterations of the Superman movies. Like he barely seems to care that Superman's dad put him in jail. The fights were better in this than in Superman 1, but they're still limited by their era, unfortunately. I like that Lex kept it simple this time and just wanted Australia instead. The casting is still very good in these. Anyone who really matters in this movie is usually doing a great job. But overall, I like this movie, but it was just a tiny bit worse than its predecessor. At number 2, I have the original Superman from 1978. Okay, I know this is the classic, and it is pretty good, but it's not my favorite. For one, the setup was way too long for me. They spend so much time on Krypton at the beginning, and then a good chunk in Smallville as well. It took so long for Clark to get to the Daily Planet, and even longer for Superman to be there. One of the best things about this movie is the casting. Superman, Lois Lane, Lex Luthor were all perfectly casted. Especially for the time, I can't imagine anyone else in those roles. I also thought the ending was cool. This was before all the tropes of going back in time to save someone was like a thing, so I really enjoyed this. I thought Lex's plan was batshit insane, but hypothetically would have made him the richest man alive. It was certainly better than the crystal continent idea he had in Superman Returns. I'll give him that. This is classic Superman that everyone grew up with. In my ranking, at least, this is the second Superman movie chronologically, but to me, this is definitely the first one where it feels like Superman. The silliest part is always his dad just not letting him save him from the tornado. There's more important things than keeping his identity. I don't know. This movie clearly paved the way for Superman movies for years to come. This was my first time watching this movie in a long time, and I thought it was pretty darn good. And at number 1, I have Superman 2025. This is the newest entry into the Superman universe. And after seeing this in theaters last Friday, I can definitely say this is the most comic booky movie I've ever seen. James Gunn is always very good at the lighthearted, silly movie vibe. I really enjoyed this movie and want to start by talking about everything I liked about it. Firstly, like I said before, it is so comic booky. It felt like I was watching an episode of the animated Justice League on Boomerang. Most movies will steer away from the silly, but James steered right into it, with things like his robot helpers, Krypto, and even his hypnotizing glasses that help him keep his identity safe. That's crazy. And Lex was amazing in it. Nicholas Hoult did such a good job as a dweeb rich kid that's just too smart for his own good, and incredibly jealous of Superman. He spewed hatred with every word he said and every action he made against Superman. The rest of the actors were very good as well. From Lois Lane to Guy Gardner, they did a great job casting. The only few that stood out to me as not great actors were Ma, Pa, and the engineer. I just thought they weren't up to par to the rest of the cast. I loved Krypto in this movie as well. He was just a dog, basically, and watching him fight off bad guys was great too. Another standout character for me was Mr. Terrific. I thought he was so fun and cool. Like, I wasn't sure how they'd get him onto the big screen because I'd seen him in the shows, on the animated shows, but he was awesome. This movie brought characters I never thought I'd see in theaters out, and they did it in such a good way. Who would have thought that there'd be, like, Metamorpho done well in a movie? The main thing I've seen a couple people complain about in this movie was how some of the characters didn't get any development. But let me tell you, I don't care if Cat Grant or Green Lantern get any development in a Superman movie. This is the first one. There's plenty of time to get developed in future movies. I think people are just complaining to complain at this point. I'm also so confused at the people saying it's woke. I think that's so silly. It shouldn't be woke to be anti-billionaire and anti-hostile takeover and pro-immigrant. That's crazy. I think the narrative people are making up is so silly and stupid. This movie is very good, and I feel confident with DC in James Gunn's hands at this point. Also, I love that Krypto took down a tech billionaire. I thought that was very fun. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. What's your favorite Superman movie? Leave it in the comments below. Subscribe if you enjoy, and I'll see you next week. Bye.